All right, hello, welcome. My name is Colleen. I'm a traditional astrology student. I offer birth chart readings. I am doing astro education on the YouTubes, and I do book reviews as well. You can follow me on Instagram or go to my website, that'll be in the description below. So today's video is all about how to read your birth chart. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do this because, it's kind of like my thing to read people's birth charts, but it's a right. Honestly, it's so important. Astrology is a language, right? And to understand your birth chart is sort of a birthright that you should be entitled to. Just the same way that you were taught about science and English and math in school, you should learn about the energies that are composed of you and what you will encounter in your life as far as energies go. So, without further ado, I have 7 considerations for understanding your birth chart. First, I figured, before we even get into that, step 0, how to find a birth chart, how to find your birth chart. So, the first thing that you'll need to get your birth chart, well, I suppose is an internet connection and a computer, but beyond that, you'll need your birthplace, date, of course, and time. You need to have a time because the ascendant, which is something we'll talk about momentarily, will change regularly. So this is the website that I recommend, astro.com. If you're not signed in, I think it'll still look the same, that just might ask you to sign in. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to click on this right here, extended chart selection. So when you click on that, it's going to bring this up. You're going to put in, well, mine's already in there, I guess, but it's going to ask you for your date, your time, all of that. Put that all in, put the place in, and the most important part, from my perspective at least, of astrology and like philosophically what I think, I do whole sign houses. The reason that I do whole sign houses is something I would like to get into in a different video. I don't really think this is the time and place for it, as we're just talking about how to read your birth chart. But long story short, it makes all of the houses an even 30 degrees, and in my opinion, Awesome's razor, the simplest solution, is usually correct. So that's part of the most simple version of why I use it. In my own chart personally, I've also found it to be a lot more accurate. So anyway, if you need to know how to find a birth chart, I can put this in the description as well. Go to astro.com. You're going to click on extended chart selection, and then when you get there, put all your information in, date, time, place. If you don't have a date time that's totally accurate, get your birth chart. Whoever has it, text them, call them, try to get that. If you can't get that for whatever reason, you can still read your chart without a rising sign. It's just the context of the houses give a lot of insight into what a lot of the energies will mean and how they'll be manifested. The first thing that you need to do when you look at your birth chart is find your angles. And what I mean by that is, if you see right here, we have AC 20. AC stands for ascendant. This is the most eastern part of the sky when you were born. That represents the horizon. That's what this line is in the middle here. So your ascendant is what was rising over the sky as you took your first breath, the moment that you were born. So for me, that was Capricorn, which is what this symbol is right here. Your ascendant represents you, your physical body, your character, your identity, your persona, just your person, right? The ascendant and any planets in that first house sign are going to be very influential in the native, meaning the person's whose birth chart this is. And that is not the case for every house. All of the other houses mostly have to do with other people or other considerations in your life. Things in the first house, transits happening to your first house, are almost always going to be about you and your physical likeness. Opposite of that AC that you see on the chart, we have this little tick right here. Usually it would say DC, it does not on this chart. DC stands for descendant. So if this is the point in the sky that was ascending as I was born, Over here in Cancer, at opposite 20 degrees, is my descendant. So that's what was on the western horizon, what was setting the moment I was born. And this axis and all of like the 180-degree opposite houses, they're antithetical to each other. One represents the opposite of the other. So if the ascendant is you and your physical likeness and who you are and your energy and your character, the 7th house is the people you attract, your long-term connections. And that can be platonic, that can be business, that can be romantic, it can be familial, any of those. It's the people in your life that are usually there for long periods of time, and positive or negative have an influence on how you understand partnership. So for me, I have it in Cancer, and this usually means that I would attract people who have nurturing energy, who are more sensual and sensitive, could have Cancer placements. For example, I have quite a few friends that are Cancer rising, so they have Capricorn, where my sun is, in their 7th house, and I also have a pretty long list of people that I've either had relationships with or just long-term friendships with that have Cancer suns. Now, I'm not going to go into what every house means in this video. I am going to do a separate video for that because, again, we're just trying to understand what the birth chart means here, how to read it. So if you'd like to watch that video, comment below if you think that's something you'd be interested in, and subscribe so you can get a notification when I post it. But just a quick little insight to how I'm going to teach it and how you can understand it and research it on your own. You can just look up houses in astrology. But if the first house is you, the native of the birth chart, or me in this case, this is my birth chart, the houses after and before it sort of relate to the same topic, just an extension further. For example, the 2nd house is your resources, the things on your person. And that can be like resources, that can be money, that can be skill sets, anything that like you have is like the key word for the 2nd house. Like I am is the key word for the 1st house. If we go before, so we're looking at the 12th house now, all of the topics of the 12th house are like what's underneath the surface. So if the 1st house is my mind and my physical body and who I am as a person consciously, the 12th house is who I am subconsciously. What are my hidden desires? What's going on in my mental health that I'm not acknowledging particularly? And so on. So I'm going to do a video about that, but just a little quick insight right there. It's a really interesting theory to understand the houses that way. That just sort of clicks for me at least. But anyway, so we've got the house axis of me and you, and then the other angle that is very important is the axis of public and private. So up here we have MC. That stands for medium coli in, when was it Italian? Latin. So Latin for middle of the sky. And it's the highest point in the sky when you were born. Think like high noon or whatever, like cowboy. Opposite of that is the IC, which I think is Imum Coli, which is bottom of the sky. So that's like, if you're born at midnight, your sun is usually going to be on your IC. And that's this little tick right here that you can't quite see so perfectly. Anyway, your MC, or medium coli, is your public life. It is how the world sees you. In some forms of astrology, people associate it with the father. That is more because we live in a patriarchal society, and so how we present ourselves to the world has become sort of enveloped in like a strange sense of masculinity in a way. It's also interesting, some astrologers associate the 10th house with fathers or masculine figures, and then the 4th house with feminine figures. And I think it also sort of goes back to how traditionally, like, your father would prepare you for your job in life versus your mother would prepare you for how to, like, sort of take care of yourself, do laundry, cook a meal, like house, homely things, right? Which is what the 4th house is all about. Private matters. It's your private space. It's how you connect to your roots. It's your family. It's your sense of like groundedness. us very much. So it's basically the axis of public self, career, reputation, legacy, and then private self, your roots, your inner self, your private life. Part 2. All right, so you've got an ascendant. You know what it is. But do you know what planet rules your ascendant? Probably not. Have you heard of a ruling planet before? Maybe you have. Well, basically, a ruling planet is going to deposit energy into your ascendant and twist your character a little bit differently. So like for me, I'm a Capricorn rising, right? Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Now, if you don't know all of like the rulerships for the planets, literally just go to Wikipedia, type in planetary rulership, and it's going to give you a whole list. I'm a Capricorn rising. Saturn is my ruling planet. So now we just gotta look to find Saturn in the chart. And if you don't know what all the glyphs mean, you could first get them tattooed on your knuckles like I did, or if you're not into that, there's a little key down here. So Saturn is this guy with the cross and then this little hump. And I actually learned what that means from one of my astrology teachers, Kelsey, who's fantastic. Kelsey Rose Arts? I don't remember. I'll put her Instagram in the bottom. But anyway, she taught me that the glyphs all have traditional meanings. It's literally a language. So the cross is matter, and then this is the curve of the mind. So Saturn is literally matter over mind. And then if we look at Jupiter, which is right here, this is the curve of the mind, and it's over top of matter. So Jupiter represents mind over matter. I digress. I have a Mercury in Sagittarius, so you're just gonna have to like roll with the punches when I spit random facts at you. But anyway, so basically, when you're looking at your ruling planet, like for me, Saturn in Aries, the best way to understand what that means for you is sort of how, because it's depositing energy into your ascendant, it's very telling of your story, like your evolution, how you grow into yourself as a person. Your ascendant is how you show up to the world. So wherever your ruling planet is, I would say it's usually pretty telling of why you show up the way you do. Like for me, to be transparent, I have it in the 4th house of family and home. It's also making a square to my sun, and a trine to my moon in the 12th house. So I felt very black sheep in my family a lot growing up. I felt very restricted in how I wanted to express myself, my ego, right? And I felt very just isolated from the connections that they had versus the type of conversations I had to have with my Mercury, also trining my Saturn. So a lot of the way that I show up to the world today has a lot to do with wanting people to feel included and wanting people to feel like they have a structured place to go to, because I very much didn't have that growing up. I did not have the foundation of a family that I think most people have. So my whole thing in life, being a Capricorn rising, is to work hard enough so that I can provide that structure and stability for myself in my 4th house, because again, Aries, Saturn, very independent. Let's actually do it with someone else's chart. So this is my friend Jessie. Jessie has a night chart, which is going to be useful as we get into talking about some more techniques. So Jessie has just barely Scorpio rising, and Scorpio is traditionally ruled by Mars. So we look for Mars in her chart, which is right here. She has Mars in the 12th house. In Libra, Mars is also not too happy in Libra. I'm not quite sure if it's in detriment or if it's in fall. I kind of forget, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. The point is, Mars is not like really vibing out so much. So for Jessie, having Mars in the 12th house could be very and in Libra, not really having a lot of tools. Having Mars in your 12th house as your ruling planet really shows that understanding what's going on beneath the surface for you is essential to how you show up to the world. Like having a really good connection to your intuition, which is a 12th house keyword, is crucial for your well-being. And it's also very interesting that she has Saturn opposite in the 6th house of routine, physical health, schedules, all of like the 6th house connects to Virgo because that's the 6th zodiac sign. So schedules, routine, physical health, things related to your gut, I'm pretty sure, is like in medical astrology. So this could very easily manifest as having a lot of mental health issues that aren't really being acknowledged or balanced, because that's like the key word for an opposition. Manifesting in physical health deterioration because whatever's going on in the mind isn't being addressed and then is coming out to the surface in a very like tangible sort of way. So when you look at your ruling planet, like I just did for Jessie, the most important thing is to see which house it's in so you can understand the topics. So 12th house, we have intuition, mental health, subconscious thoughts, hidden enemies, anything under the surface. And then to also look at the aspects that it makes. So the most prominent and challenging one for Jessie is that opposition to Saturn in her 6th house of physical health routines and so on. But it's making a lot of really beautiful aspects to her 4th house of family and home, where she has an Aquarius stellium. Also, how funny it is that we both have an Aquarius stellium, like almost at the exact same degrees. But anyway, having Mars opposite Saturn, it could be really hard for her to maintain a regular schedule or a routine, or maybe that's really what she's been lacking to be able to manage her mental health. But the good news is her family, or at least maybe not her family, maybe like her physical home that she's created for herself, or just the place that she goes to sort of be in a private sphere, is very rejuvenating for her. Having Venus at 0 degrees trine that, Mars in the 12th, I think dissociating and disconnecting from people and just finding whatever makes her feel beautiful or like at peace or valued is essential to fill her cup back up. And I could go on talking about the stellium, but I won't. So step 3 is looking at personal planets, because not all of these planets are very telling of you as a person. There's really only 5, I would say, that are going to give you insight to who you are, and even then we're gonna further clarify what that exactly means and how that's kind of a loaded thing to say in astrology. So the personal planets are going to be these 5 right here. So we've got Mars, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and the Sun. The reason I say those are the personal planets and tell more about who you are as a person is because those are the fastest moving planets. Now, I guess like I just said, Jessie and I both have an Aquarius stellium. If you don't know what a stellium is, that's just at least 3 planets, I'd say, within like a 10-degree orb from each other. And an orb is just the different degrees that we've got going on. So Jessie has 3 planets within 5 degrees, like 0, 2, 5. And I also have 3 planets within 5 degrees, 3, 6, 8, right? But you'll notice we both have Uranus almost at the exact same degree, regardless of being born like nearly a year apart. And that's because outer planets move a lot slower, right? Basic astronomy, we all know this. Like, for example, the cycle of Jupiter is 12 years. And all of the planets after that are even longer. Like Saturn, I'm pretty sure, is 27 and a half years. Uranus is even more than that. Neptune, Pluto is 248 years. So we're going to talk about personal, intergenerational, and then generational planets. So for the personal planets, these first 5 right here, each of them rule different topics. benefics. And I'm going to do more videos going further into what it means if you have like a Mars in Cancer versus a Mars in Scorpio versus a Mars in Libra. But just for the sake of this, let's quickly run through what each of them mean, and then we'll look at an example chart with Jessie's chart and my chart. So in Jessie's chart, let's see, she has her sun in Aquarius in the 4th house. We're not going to look at aspects yet either. That'll be the next thing after we talk about planets. But so just having a sun in Aquarius, the sun is in detriment in Aquarius, and the reason it's in detriment, or fall, I think is actually the right word. I should really figure that out, but you know, we're just doing basics here, that's okay. The reason it's not very happy, basically, in Aquarius is because it's opposite of Leo, and Leo is where the sun loves to be. Leo is ruled by the sun. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, so the sun is basically in Saturn's terms, you could say. Saturn is the planet of restrictions, adult things, reality. So the sun in Leo is like, woohoo, like let's vibe, like let's be creative, let's have fun, let's do recreational things. The sun in Aquarius is like, we need to do this, and just create a better sense of collective energy. Having a sun there could really show that Jessie cares a lot about the collective energy. She's probably somebody that is very forward thinking and maybe even sort of eclectic, maybe sort of has an energy that has been a little different from everyone her entire life, very like outcasted sort of energy. Having her sun in the 4th house could mean that a lot of her ego development and where she feels most at home is literally her home, literally like where she goes to retreat from the world, the private sector of her life, or whatever that means to her. And that could be a person being her home, that could be a physical place being her home, that could be an environment that she feels like very rejuvenated in. Depends. That's the thing with astrology, is we can't make a generalization that this always means this. It means different things for different people. And in an astrology consultation, we can build context by looking at transits to really figure out what that represents in your chart. So anyway, let's move on. Jessie has a Sagittarius moon, which we love that. I also have a Sagittarius moon. Anyway, Jessie has hers in the 2nd house of resources, talents, skills, monetary possessions, material possessions, things that her person has. So having a moon in the 2nd house usually shows that a lot of her sense of security comes from the things that she has. She could have a lot of really like sentimental little things, sort of like knickknacks. And then her moon is in Sagittarius, which the moon in Sagittarius is working in Jupiter's terms. Jupiter is the planet of expansion and abundance. So people with the Sagittarius moon, it's relative to the other placements in their chart, of course, but are usually very silver lining people. They're very rose-colored glasses. They can tend to be a little idealistic when it comes to emotional things. They can tend to sort of be somewhat dogmatic, but just very passionate in what they believe. So you sort of have to be aware of when you're being a little too preachy towards people, speaking from experience, but nonetheless, we love a Sag moon. Sag moons are just that fiery, chaotic energy, and they're always down for an adventure, which we just love. And I mean, having it in the 2nd house, maybe her favorite type of possession or thing that she can have is an experience, is that like Sagittarius moon like growth. All right, let's move on. And then we've got the Mercury, which is right here. She has a Mercury in Capricorn in the 3rd house. The 3rd house is communication, travel, short distance travel, siblings, and then Mercury in Capricorn. It's not too pissed off, it's not too happy, it's very pragmatic, it's very business oriented, it's very focused on what it needs to do, executing that thing, not really someone verbally speaking to sort of trail off on a tangent, very specific with their words, very grounded with their intention of their words, very good at sort of just getting to the point, which can't relate, but that's okay. Not all of us have to be such, poised speakers. Some of us can be philosophical tangents that never end. Mercury in the third house is in something that we call, I think it's accidental dignity. And the reason for that is, as I've said before, each of the houses is ruled by a zodiac sign. So the third zodiac is Gemini. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So when you have Mercury in the third house, it's an accidental dignity, meaning you're probably pretty blessed when it comes to communicating. That doesn't mean like you're a super experienced communicator, because as we'll talk about, planets have to get activated for some skills or different energies in whatever way they manifest to really shine in your person or in your life experience. But I'd say a Capricorn Mercury in the third house, probably not misunderstood too much, probably pretty good at expressing what it is that she needs, and getting to the point with whatever her message is. Let's move on. All right, Venus. She's got Venus at 0 degrees. So another really important thing is to look at degrees, because there's a whole thing on degree theory that, like, for example, 17 degrees is considered like a famous degree, long term, and like 5 degrees is considered like short term fame. 0 and 29 degrees in a birth chart are very powerful energy, and that's because it's just transition from one side to the other. So having something at 29 degrees is considered the anaretic degree, meaning it's like the planet is basically like, ah, shit, like, did I do what I needed to do? Like, let's do one last big fucking chaotic thing to be like dramatic. And then 0 degree is sort of the same energy. I don't know if there's like an exact name like anaretic for it or not, but it's just ingress to a sign, so it's sort of like a, whew, okay, where am I now type of energy. So Jessie having her Venus in the 4th house at 0 degrees, very important for her journey, especially because it's trining her ruling planet of Mars. We already talked about 4th house of family, home, roots, private life, and so on. Having a planet here and pretty close to her IC almost exactly, which would be right here at 8 degrees. She just finds a lot of beauty in her own personal space. She probably has a beautiful home. She probably works very hard to create a place that makes her feel valued, and just has a lot of good vibes in whatever place makes her feel the most rejuvenated. Having Jupiter pretty close to her Venus too is probably a lot of opportunities to do that. Probably pretty lucky when it comes to like her home life, her family life, her roots, her private sector, and whatever that means for her. Yeah, all right, let's move on. And then Mars. We already talked about Mars, but just to reiterate, Mars is the planet of aggression, assertion, action, sort of like vitality in a like, let's do it way. Mars rules war, just because that's a sense of action. And having it in the 12th house is all about things under the surface. It's just a lot of really focused energy on figuring out what's going on beneath the surface. And it could be very confusing because Mars in Libra is not where it likes to be. Mars likes to be in Aries, right? The sign opposite to it, as we talked about with this. Jessie has a few planets in detriment, which definitely could lead to just a confused energy, because the planet of Mars wants to be aggressive and assertive and do the Aries things, but it's in Libra that wants to balance things and make things beautiful and harmonic. So this could also manifest, now that I say that, as sort of hiding how you feel to make other people feel better, and sort of pretending nothing's going on beneath the surface because you don't want to like inconvenience other people by telling them what's going on. So now that I think of it, also with this trine in these family home placements, that could manifest a few different ways. It could be that her family was very supportive and maybe saw through that and was like, we need to help you. It could also be that they encouraged her to not work through those problems and created harmony by just sort of pretending everything was okay. That's the thing with aspects, which we'll talk about, that they could really manifest a lot of different ways, which is why you have to build context. But those are all the personal planets. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so then the next part is malefics and benefics of sect. Now, if you've never heard of this before, sect, S-E-C-T, is a concept in Hellenistic astrology where if you're born during the daytime versus the nighttime, you sort of have like different planets on your team, meaning the malefic of your sect is really trying to kind of like mess up your plans, bringing really like conflicting, harsh, not constructive energy. And then your benefic of sect is really trying to make your life easier, more harmonic, what you want it to be. It's bringing abundance, it's bringing joy, it's bringing opportunities, and so on. So, if, like me, you were born during the daytime, your benefic, or good planet, of sect is Jupiter, which I have right here in the second house in Aquarius. My malefic of sect, because I was born during the daytime, is Mars, which I also have in the same sign of Aquarius in the second house. So really quick, if you don't know if you were born during the day or the nighttime by just looking at your chart, maybe you're born at like 5 p.m. and you're like, I don't know. Again, this line is the horizon, or like the ascendant versus descendant line. So like I was born just at dawn, so the sun was like just barely over the horizon. It's still a day chart. There's like further context we could get into, and theory I don't know a lot about that I probably can actually get into, but I was born during the day, and I know that because my sun is above my ascendant. So if your sun is in the top half of your chart, you're born during the day. For example, Jessie, born at 11:58 p.m., her sun, bottom of the chart. So let's talk about what benefics and malefics represent in the chart. So basically, there's two things that we can talk about here. Your benefic in your chart is where you're going to have a lot of good luck, you're going to have things go smoothly, you're going to have opportunities, right? Your malefic is where you're going to have more blockages, you have more obstacles, more downs, more lows. I have them in the same sign. So what this has been interpreted as, where I've read it before, is that a lot of your lows and your highs are paired together. They're one and the same most of the time. And in my life, that's been pretty true. And mine's in my second house of materials, possessions, money, resources, skills, and that has been pretty chaotic in my life. Another thing that we can talk about is how the transiting planets in the sky, those are still your malefics and benefics. So for me, when a Mars transit happens through any of my houses, it's not cute. It's just not cute. Versus a Saturn transit, which is not my malefic of sect, it's actually pretty constructive because I was born during the day. It's not really going to be as negative for me. It's going to be more constructive. It's going to be more of like a learning lesson versus like a roadblock that I can't get around. And as for Venus in my second house, it's not the promise of value, beauty, and harmony that I want. It could be like a really tiny thing since it's not my benefic of sect. It's just not quite as promised as Jupiter, because that is my benefic of sect. So when Venus goes through my house, it might make things better, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's long term. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the type of better that I want it to be, or that doesn't necessarily mean it's happening to me. It could be more of my circumstance. So that is the day chart example of sect, and then let's do the night chart. So Jessie was born at night. And so her malefic of sect is going to be Saturn in her 6th house, and her benefic is going to be Venus in her 4th house. So Venus in her 4th house as her benefic, again, probably a very beautiful home, probably really enjoys her alone time and gets a lot of, what is that word, like respite, or like just rejuvenates herself, fills up her cup when she's by herself. And probably has a pretty good connection with her family, her mother specifically. Maybe even with this like sextile happening to the 6th house, maybe some of the key to her finding this balance between her Mars and her Saturn could come from like her mom or her sisters if she has them, or some sort of like connection to her family, her roots, her private self, giving her that structure that maybe she's been missing. And speaking of structure, Saturn in her 6th house definitely struggles with schedules, routines, and like physical health could come up. And just maybe just like blockages with like how to really manage those parts of herself, how to really build the most effective structure or schedule that doesn't overextend herself, but at the same time like honors whatever it is that she needs in her life. Okay, on to step 5. So now we're gonna talk about generational planets, and we're gonna go kind of quick because it's just not as important unless it's your benefic or malefic of sect that it is, but if it's not, then it's not going to tell you a lot about who you are as a person. It's more going to be descriptive of your generation's energy and what you're called to do in this life. So Jupiter is what I would call an intergenerational planet. And I would say that because it's in the same zodiac sign for a little over a year, usually like 13 months. And then Saturn I would also call an intergenerational planet because it's in the same sign for about 2.5 years. Because everybody born within the same 2 years has the same sign for Saturn, you want to look more at the house that it's in, and that's going to give you insight to where you're really being called to be an authority. That's like a Saturn word, where you're being called to boss up and face reality and meet restrictions with a mindset that you can overcome them. So for Jessie, for example, as we already talked about, that's in her 6th house. That rules daily things, like I said, routines, schedules, coworkers, labor of any kind, physical health. Specifically in ancient astrology, I've read that it means like ill health, but not to scare you or anything, just could be that she has to build a specific regimented schedule on how to avoid falling into like bad health patterns and so on. Okay, and then Jupiter, which is in her 4th house of Aquarius, right here. Again, we're going to look at the house to get further context on where you're getting abundance and luck and so on relative to, you know, if it's your planet of sect, that'll show how powerful it is, but the house is going to give you more context to what it exactly means for you. And if you have it in a stellium, you know, like Jessie does, that is going to be more prominent in your chart, even though she wasn't born during the daytime. It's pretty much right on top of her Venus, which is at 0 degrees, and very close to one of her angles, like we talked about before. So in this particular chart, it is going to be more influential, but I digress. All right, so now let's talk about just generational planets. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So let's go to my chart for this one. So Uranus is right here in my chart. I have Uranus at 6 degrees of Aquarius in the 2nd house, also in my stellium, so it is going to be more important for me because it's almost on top of my Mars. Uranus represents upheaval, change. It was discovered during the Industrial Revolution, so a lot of people associate it with like an expanse of scientific knowledge and, like I said, innovation and just creative genius and so on. After Uranus, we have Neptune, which I have almost on top of my ascendant, which I have a lot of thoughts about that. I'm going to write an article about that probably. But anyway, Neptune rules things like mirrors, fantasy, perception. It's associated with the zodiac sign of Pisces, which is very like otherworldly. Neptune is very otherworldly. The last time Neptune and Jupiter were conjunct in Aquarius, actually, was when the movie Avatar came out, and everyone talked about what a cinematic, you know, like mindfuck that was. And actually, Jupiter and Neptune are going to be conjunct again in Pisces in April, I think April 12th of this coming year, which is maybe around the time that the second Avatar movie is going to come out. Shout out to the astrology podcast for talking about that. So anyway, Neptune is like deception, fantasy, and blurred images. With it on top of my ascendant in Capricorn, I realized I've kind of had a grind set, if you will, of just being an adult my entire life. I've had a really hard time perceiving who I am and what I actually want, and have been reflecting what I expect other people to expect of me, which is very meta, but also very Neptune. So Neptune is sort of a tricky little guy that can make you a beautiful artist, a beautiful person. Neptune on the ascendant is associated with beauty. But anyway, it's a tricky planet either way. Also generational though, so like pretty much everyone since, God, I don't even know when it ingressed into Capricorn. I want to say, I don't know, let's look it up. Let's look it up. When did Neptune go into Capricorn? I'm going to guess the 80s. 1984 until 1988. There you go. All right, so 1984 to 1988. So if you're born at any time between those 14 years, you have this placement. It being on an angle is going to be more influential. So like I said, for me, it's on my ascendant by 8 degrees loosely. And if we consider progress charts, which if you don't know what that is, I can do a separate video on it. If you'd like to know what it is, comment below. But anyway, as my ascendant moves further and further in my progress chart, it will be conjuncted. And it will eventually be at 29 degrees in my progress chart as well. After that, we have Pluto. Okay, so something that's really cool, it doesn't perfectly line up, but you can sort of take the generations and line them up with the Pluto cycles. So, for example, Pluto in Sagittarius ingressed in 1986, and that's pretty commonly where people draw the line for Gen Z. In 1983, Pluto went into Scorpio, which is also a pretty common date for people to associate with millennials. Now, Gen X and baby boomers, sort of murky as far as the associations with that, but I did find this graphic that literally confirms the 96 and then says 81, but 83, whatever. It says Gen X from 1965 to 1980, and if we look up, let's see, when did Pluto go into Libra? 1971. So again, pretty close, not quite dead on or anything, but then I just looked up when Pluto went into Leo, and it was 39 to 58, which would be the baby boomer generation. And that's the one that doesn't line up so perfectly. And that's more because people obviously associate baby boomers with like war, and like the ingress of women getting impregnated from men after they were gone for a long time. Ugh, I don't know, I hate how I worded that. But anyway, so those are generational planets. Pluto moves in a 248-year cycle, and it's in the same sign for, as we saw, almost 20 years. So it's not going to give you a lot of insight into you as a person. It's more of a generational thing. I wouldn't even focus on interpreting what it means in the sign, or in the house, I mean. It's not going to give you insight to really who you are as a person unless it's on one of your angles, which could just show a very transformative part of whatever sector that's in for the different angles, or if it's conjunct a planet, could just be very intense, dynamic, transformative energy that's sort of blended with that planet. All right, so those are generational planets. Step 6 is aspect interpretation. So all those lines in the middle that you're like, what's that? So this line right here, if it had another line right here and this other fire sign, it'd be making a triangle. It is 90 degrees, and because it makes a triangle, we call it a trine. Trines are harmonic energy. They're shared between signs of the same element, so like fire, right? We have Aries, Sagittarius, Leo, those are all fire signs. That's why they're red. Trines usually signify two planets that are not necessarily, they're just sharing the same energy. So they don't even really have to like support each other. That's more of a sextile keyword. They just get each other and they're doing sort of the same thing, just in different ways. So the next one we can talk about is sextile. So I have a sextile. Actually, let's look at Jessie's chart. Jessie has a sextile between her moon in Sagittarius and her sun in Aquarius at the exact degree of 14. So very strong. What that sort of means is sextile keyword, so it's 60 degrees, right? Sex. It's supportive energy. So it's not going to be guaranteed in the same way that a trine would be, like this right here. You have to work towards it. So emotionally, her inner self, how she defines herself emotionally through her resources, her skills, and her talents, can be really supportive by how she nurtures herself in her private sector. And so that could also mean that her retreat, her place that she fills up her own cup and, doesn't have to worry about what the world thinks of her, that energy that she puts into that can help her understand emotionally what she needs to feel secure and safe, which are also second house keywords. So that's a sextile. Opposition we talked about. Those are 180 degrees apart from each other. Those represent a need for balance, a lack of balance. If you have an opposition in a synastry chart, which is where you take somebody else's chart and put it on top of yours, that is, in my opinion, beautiful. I love oppositions in relationships with people because they balance you. It's harmonic energy. When it's in your own natal chart, it shows sort of you pulling yourself in two different ways and having to figure out where to find common ground. All right, and then lastly, square. So I already talked about this. I have a square of Sun and Saturn. It's not super close in degree, but I mean, yeah, Jessie doesn't have a square or anything either. So squares are sparky, tense, conflicting energy, and that's not to say that they're bad and you should be scared of them if you have a bunch of squares in your chart. It just shows that there's a lot of growth that has to happen. So for me, a lot of my growth and my ego and who I am is coming from my private self, my family, my roots, my home. So that's very true. Personally, I can relate to that. So much of who I am today and who I continue to be is defined by the environment that I grew up in, and also the environment that I every day try to build for myself to make me feel comfortable and safe and happy in who I am as a person and what I want to grow from and help other people grow from. So don't be afraid of conflict. It is absolutely necessary. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of facing the hard stuff because you have to challenge yourself. And if you're not challenging yourself, then you're not growing and you're holding yourself back from your potential. So that's the tea. Anyway, those are the aspects. I believe I covered all of them. We have trine, that's harmonic, sextile, that's supportive, oppositions that are balancing energy, and then squares, which are conflicting energies that sort of symbolize a need for growth. Lastly, I want to talk about timing techniques. Because some of you might look at your birth chart and you might be like, I don't relate to that. A Leo moon? Not me. Or Mercury in Virgo? No. And it's like, okay, how old are you first of all? Like, you have to be alive for a certain amount of time to even get through all of your planetary returns. For example, I have not even had my Saturn return yet. I'm 24 years old. Saturn return usually happens when you're about 27 to 29, somewhere in between there. It's the last planet to return back to your spot in your birth chart. So in astrology, it's sort of seen as the gateway to adulthood. Or just really when you get checked by Saturn to be like, are you doing what you need to do? Are you focusing on the part of your life, your birth chart that you need to be able to grow and improve as a person? Are you focusing on what's been restricting you and saying, okay, I'm going to overcome that obstacle, or are you running away from it and avoiding it? Number 7 is activations using timing techniques. Not all your planets are activated in your chart yet. So There's so many ways that we could talk about timing techniques. I mean, so I can add transits onto both of these charts. Let's do that. That is a very basic one that we can do. Transits are just the planets in the sky right now. So let's just spit some off. We could do transits, which is like the planets in the sky. We could do secondary progress charts, which is where if you're born on February 2nd, like Jessie, every day after her original birthday is symbolic of that year of her life. So like February 3rd would be symbolic of her first year of life, meaning when she turns 1 until her second birthday. And then on February 20th would be symbolic, that astrology chart, of her 18th year of life, because that would be 18 days after her birthday. You could do zodiacal releasing, which is using ancient astrology lots to talk about fortune, which is like your body, your health, to talk about spirit, which is like your mental stimulation, your job, or arrows, which is like your emotional and like relational connection to people. So I could go on, there's even more, but you also have a solar return, which is on your birthday every year. You have like a new birth chart essentially that's going to give you insight to the energies that you will be subjected to that year, and so on. One thing that's really interesting is in the transits for Jessie right now, the most prominent one is definitely this Mars that has been going through her second house of resources. In a day chart, Mars transiting through your second house could be not great for your money, could be impulsive spending, could be just stressing about resources and how you're going to make ends meet. But I think it's a little deeper than that for Jessie, only because she has her moon in that house. So it could be a lot more having to do with her emotional sense of security and what that means to her, how she feels like she belongs in this world, and what resources or skills or things, what things does she what things does she surround herself with to feel that sense of security? When Mars is going over your moon, that's very like pop off energy, that's very panicky energy, that's very anxious energy. And I just spoke with her actually, and she said that she's been going through it for sure, and not really feeling so balanced in who she is as a person, and just having sort of that internal chaotic energy ramping up. So unfortunately, as this goes, well, at least the transit has happened. It's a little degrees or so past her moon. So that energy is starting to not peak as much. It's definitely on the decline, which is great for her. Other things that are interesting, Venus retrograde just happened on her Mercury, so she could be sort of rethinking how she's communicating her values and what it is that she really does value in terms of how she talks with people. If she has siblings, it could be related to them more than her. It could also have to do with how she travels. Having a Venus retrograde in your third house, maybe she got a new car, maybe she wants to get a new car, maybe she's thinking about getting a new car. I don't know. So that's just an example how you can look at the different planets. If they're conjuncting another planet, you will feel it a lot. If it's just transiting through the house, like a moon transit, for example, a Pisces moon transit in your 5th house, maybe you feel more creative, maybe you have cool dreams, but it's not always going to be as tangible of a manifestation. Let's see for me. All right, so I have the Mars coming to conjunct my moon in my 12th house. And same as Jessie, I have not been feeling the most calm lately. I wouldn't say I've been sort of panicky by any means, but look, it's right on top of my Mercury though. And I have felt very like mentally stimulated and inspired to be making all these videos, for example. What else? I just had the Venus retrograde go over my ascendant actually. And I've been rethinking a lot of what it means to choose myself and love myself unconditionally, and because Venus also rules Taurus and Libra, it's my 5th house of creativity and like fun, and 10th house of career. I've been rethinking a lot of how much I value my free time and how I want to spend my free time and how I want to be creative in my free time and not just consuming content, but creating content that I truly care about, which is like what I'm doing right now, you know? Other things, Saturn is going to be, let's see, what degree is Saturn at? Saturn is at 12 degrees. Saturn just recently went through my entire Aquarius stellium in my second house, so I don't even know, honestly. My Aquarius stellium still confuses me. I think I've matured a lot in how I buy things. When Saturn was going over my Mars, I think I started to get really serious about how I can't just buy things because I like them. I have to think about it in terms of a budget. Mercury is currently in shadow right now, and it's going through my stellium as well, and then it's going to retrograde over it. So I'm very interested to see what that will mean for me. As Mercury went over my Venus, I actually reached out to some of my old friends that have their Venus in Leo exactly opposite it, so that was pretty interesting. And then I also had a ton of ideas for YouTube videos when Mercury was going over my Venus. Mercury is like mental stimulation, Venus is beauty and values, and, you know, like creativity, I would say, too. Only because, for me at least, Venus rules my 5th house of creativity. So anyway, looking at transits is so powerful. I keep a journal on transits and I talk about what's going on and how it's manifesting in my life for me. I would really recommend you do that, especially if you ever think about consulting with an astrologer such as myself, because then when we look at your birth chart and I talk about the energy you have coming up this following year, it's really helpful if we can look at what happened for you last time Mars went through your 12th house, for example, or last time you had a prominent transit go over your ascendant, or last time you had a planet going through your house of career and what was going on in your job, and so on. So I did it. That's all 7 considerations for reading your birth chart. I'm scared to look at how long this video is. Of course, I'll edit it, but if you like this video, please give it a like, give me a sub, share it far and wide. If your friends don't know how to read their own birth charts, hopefully I've been helpful, at least for where to locate it, and you can go through this video and pause and rewind for whatever it is that I'm saying. My name's Colleen. I'm a traditional astrology student. If you like what I do, please consider booking a natal chart reading. I'd love to talk with you about your birth chart, upcoming transits. I'm going to offer some synastry readings, which are like compatibility love readings soon too. And feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I post about astrology and my cats, and when I burn chicken nuggets sometimes too. Thanks for watching. Bye!